In today's show, Locked On NBA, I'm going to be talking with Doug Norrie of Locked On Nets as we look at the best teams in the NBA and why they're going to win the title this season. It's coming up, guys. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On NBA. I am your Monday host, Josh Lloyd, also the host of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball channel, so you can go and find me over there. Don't forget, actually, first of all, thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day, free and available on all platforms. Today's show is brought to you by Sleeper. If you play fantasy basketball and you're looking to play for the first time and get a bunch of mates in from work or from school, Sleeper might be the option for you. So go and download that Sleeper app. They've got their exclusive game pick format where you pick just one game per week, akin to fantasy football. So if you're used to a fantasy football format for fantasy, then Sleeper has you covered. A beautiful looking app, easy to use, a great draft room, very easy situation to set up for dynasty leagues, for redraft leagues with their points format. Sleeper has everything you need from a fantasy basketball app. So go and download the Sleeper app today, get your friends involved, and start a fantasy basketball league today. All right, let's bring him in now. One of the hosts of the Locked On Nets podcast, Doug Norrie, is here with me. Doug, now on today's show, what we're looking at is the best teams in the NBA and why we should be excited about them, why the fans should have hope they're going to win the title. We'll get to that in just a second. But I guess this does tie in. Kyrie Irving's unvaccinated status, which will cause him to miss 43 games, I believe, because of the two Knicks games at Madison Square Garden, minimum. How does that, do you expect that to remain the case all season? And how does that impact the Nets' upside as a title team?
Well, he's impossible to predict because that's kind of been the theme for him since he's been in the NBA / been with the Nets, and it's been mostly good, but there have been times where it's been really tough to predict. So I hate to be like Kyrie and just kind of sidestep the question, but I would have thought he would have done it by now, just seeing sort of what the writing on the wall was in terms of the teams. I think that it will probably be handled by the time we get to that point, because I just don't think it'd be crazy to think that this was a hill that he all the way, died on for not playing games. But I will say, in terms of overall expectation for the team, if you look at Bet Online, their odds really on the Nets championship have not moved, and everyone, bettors and book alike, are totally aware what the situation is, and their odds have barely moved on it. So I'll just use that as the proxy to say, as of right now, it is not impacting it that much.
Yeah, that's true. Like, they are overwhelming favorites. And do you think that sometimes Vegas and odds makers have some sort of inside knowledge or banking on something happening? I tend to think that they are thinking the way that you are and that I am here, in that Kyrie will end up getting vaccinated and will find a way to play in these Nets home games, and more importantly, in the home games throughout the playoffs. So I don't think it's going to be that long-term concern that's going to derail the Nets and their championship aspirations. Of course, they played the first preseason game today. We won't dwell too much on that because it's very hard to judge when so many players were out. But in terms of this team, they are, as we've mentioned, according to betonline.ag and every other place you can find, but BetOnline is the place where you need to place your betting action, of course, Doug. They are the overwhelming favorites. They didn't make the conference finals last season. We know why. We know there was Kyrie injuries. We know there was Harden injuries. We know there was a foot on the line, all that sort of stuff. So, two-part question. Are the Nets deserved favorites for the NBA championship? Do you think that is a title that they should have? And what brings them not one step, but two steps further than where they finished last season?
Yeah, I think that their overall team construction this year is better. And if you're just like trying to check the boxes off of what's going to have them go further, this has already been litigated, so I probably don't need to spend too much time. If Kyrie and/or Harden is not hurt, they're at least in the finals. I don't think that doesn't seem like it's under too much debate at this point. I think most would agree that last year, if they just avoid one of those things, they probably are another step forward. So you can't project health all the time like that. But I think that if they were to go in with even 50% better health than they had last year, they're clearly the runaway favorites in terms of just overall team construction. And then when you look at the way they're just constructed, they're not built to be a defensive team, but the offense is so overwhelming when those three guys are on the court together that honestly slotting in any other two players creates massive problems for just about everybody else when you talk about a 5-man rotation, whether it's Joe Harris, whether it's Blake Griffin, whether it's LaMarcus Aldridge. Like, the names on this team are so much deeper than they were last season, of veteran Patty Mills, like a veteran talent that they kind of just were lacking near the end. They were they really had nothing at the end last year. Like, Jeff Green was hurt, Harden was hurt, Kyrie was hurt. They were on absolute fumes when it came, and they still almost made it. And so if there's any situation where that just doesn't happen this year and they go in mostly healthy, to me, they're just so far and away the favorite here based on the hierarchy of scoring, based on who they have at the top of the pecking order, that, again, I know I'm speaking somewhat in generalities, but it's just, the team is so good. I mean, this team is absolutely loaded.
They are. And you're right. That team that lost to Milwaukee, you add Kyrie in there, you add a healthy Harden. Yeah, Jeff Green's no longer with the team, but you replace him with LaMarcus Aldridge, who wasn't there. You add Paul Millsap in as well into that front court mix, who has not the all-star level starter that he used to be, but as a bench big, he's one of the best in the business and was, I think, pretty solid for most of the year for Denver last season, just giving you options. Yeah, Patty Mills coming in to replace the minutes you were getting from Mike James and Tyler Johnson. Like, it's a gigantic upgrade there as well. So it is hard to find, outside of saying injuries, like what the reason is this Nets team can't progress to the NBA Finals. So things can happen at any point, and there can be weird stuff that goes down. You can't discount injuries. You can't predict them, but you can't discount that could be something that derails. It could derail any team, but this is the team that is going to be the overwhelming favorite for the majority of the season. If you had to point to something, though, Doug, that wasn't injury related, like what could go wrong? Is it the fact that Aldridge, Griffin, Millsap, that they're 1 year older, as everyone is, but they just are not rotation players anymore? Is that the one sort of pressure point with this team? Is it depth, even though they've improved by bringing in Mills and then drafting Cam Thomas? Like, what is the one thing that could be that that fracture in this team pushing towards a championship?
I mean, if the Kyrie thing keeps going, that's definitely a problem. And I don't think, again, it's such a long season that I think it works out. But if that becomes this weird talking point for the whole season, then that could cause dividing lines. Because one thing about KD and Harden, like these guys, I mean, specifically Durant, he's so focused on winning that I could see that if there were things that started impeding winning like this, like non-basketball, I'm going to call this a non-basketball related thing, a non-basketball related thing that was starting to impede the desire or the ability to win, I could see that causing a fracture. Again, I don't think it's going to, but that could be it. I hate to sidestep this question, but they're so loaded that they can actually withstand multiple things like this actually happening. Like, if Millsap isn't as good, they just have two other, and they're not exact proxies for each other. All three of these guys played pretty differently, like Blake and LMA and Millsap. Their games are predicated on slightly different things, but they can withstand age regression a little bit on all three and still be fine, because there's two other ones. They have James Johnson kind of hanging around there too. You mentioned Cam Thomas, like they have microwave bench scoring. It looks like possibly that they just didn't have at all last season, just to be able to keep these other guys with gas in the tank during the season. So I really don't know what one thing could happen. Like, this team, I think it goes the other way. I actually think it's been sort of underreported how good the team is.
That's true.
Like, I think if anything,
they're better than last year.
Oh my God. If anything, this team is so much better that people don't seem to be actually factoring it. And I'm not a front runner like this. I really don't. I'm usually glass half empty around stuff like this, but it really is hard to find cracks in this anywhere, to the point where if they even wanted to, and I don't think they will, they could put like 70 wins up. That's how good I think the team is. That's how deep they are, how good everyone is on the team, how functional they are, can act like sort of on their own too if they need to be. All three guys can act in accordance with each other or independently. We've seen that. Like, Harden can carry like a 50+ win team sort of on his own. And so anyway, I just think if anything, people might not be recognizing just how much better this team is than last year, because it's kind of hard to picture.
Last question for you. Who is the player that they can least afford to lose to injury? Is it? I think it's between Harden and Durant. Which one hurts them most?
Definitely Durant. I mean, Durant last year, what he did specifically in the Bucks, if his toe is on the line, it's a non-debate about who the best player in basketball is, and it's only because the toe is on the line that the door stayed open just a little bit, because he was so overwhelming in that series when it needed to go on his shoulders, like historic levels of performance. The usage was unbelievable. He played every single minute for multiple games. Really, no one does that at this point. And so with a defensive responsibility that was not just, a perimeter defensive responsibility, they played him. They had to play him sort of interior minutes at times just because he was sort of their second biggest wing. I think that he's another one where we would be having a totally different conversation if he wears a size, 16 instead of 17 or whatever he wears on his feet. Like this conversation, I think also would be over, but they left the door open. So I think Durant, you just can't lose him. It'd be a really good team even without him, but he's the thing that makes it. He's so versatile. He's just like, what is he at worst? Is he the second best player in basketball? This is kind of the debate you're having around Durant.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I think it is. Now, Harden obviously sets up an offense with his passing ability, but I think Durant is the correct answer there. But imagine having a situation where you don't have to imagine. You've got a team where you've got that decision of which one is the best player in your team, when every other team pretty much would be killing for either of those guys, and even Kyrie to be on their squad. Doug, that'll do it for us today. Of course, anything Nets related, if you want to hear all the Cam Thomas talk after his big preseason outing today, Doug is going to have that covered for you over on the Locked On Nets podcast. Doug, thanks for coming on Locked On NBA with me.
All right, Josh, thanks a lot.